They buried her father in a clean coat and called it drought. She knew it was murder. Then she walked into a burning barn while 12 wolves stood frozen and dragged the lambs out alone. Thornwood Keep was dying, wells poisoned, flocks slaughtered, an ancient conspiracy of alpha lords devouring holdings, one bloodline at a time. And the wolf king who ruled it had stopped believing in survival. He saw her scorched hands. He said nothing. She didn't ask him to. Burning barns, poisoned troughs, wolves circling the ridge, a rival lord creeping through the dark with oil in his hands, and the kitchen woman they sent to be forgotten drew the map that brought a kingdom of liars down. At the ford, his blade trembled. "Stay," he whispered. "Make them pay first," she answered. The barn was on fire and not one man moved. 12 of them, 12 full-grown wolves in human skin, standing in a half circle at the edge of the heat, watching the timbers crack like old bones, watching the smoke pour black into a sky that had not given them rain in 11 weeks. The wind off the ridge carried the smell of burning oats and burning wool, and underneath both of those a thinner, sharper smell that nobody in that yard yet had the wit to name. Not one of them moved except her. She came down the slope in a plain brown dress, with the hem already torn from the briars, and a scarf knotted tight under her chin. 26 years old, a face nobody in that yard would have called important, wide hips, heavy step. The kind of woman the village butcher's wife back in Drywater Hollow once said God a built for surviving winters, not for being looked at. She went past the men, straight past them, into the barn. The eldest warrior, a gray-bearded brute named Brom Ironhand, opened his mouth to shout her back, closed it again. Because by then she was already inside the smoke, and shouting at a woman who was already inside the smoke was the kind of thing only a fool did twice. She came out 3 breaths later dragging a lamb, a big one. Half-grown, eyes rolled white, fleece singed black down one side, heavier than she should have been able to carry. She did not stop to set it down. She turned around and went back in 3 times, 3 lambs, one ewe with her foreleg burned to the knee. A sack of grain she dropped at the well and did not look at. Again, by the time the roof caved in on itself, with a sound like a great spine cracking, she was on her knees in the dirt with the ewe's head in her lap, pressing wet cloth to the burn, saying nothing. The men were still standing in the half circle. She did not look at them. She looked at the ewe. She unwound a strip of her own undershift with her teeth and bound the burn properly, because the wet cloth alone would not hold. Once the animal began to thrash again. She wiped the ash from the ewe's eye with the side of her thumb. She murmured something the men could not hear, which was nothing in particular, only the kind of low sound her mother had once made to settle a goat with a torn ear. That was the moment Eleanora Vale arrived at Thornwood Keep. She had not been hired yet. She had not been spoken to. The Alpha King who owned this dying patch of the Northern Realms had not even come down from the watchtower yet. But the contract between her and that place was written in that ash, and every man who stood there knew it, even if not one of them would have said so out loud. A pair of boots crunched up beside her in the dirt. She did not look up. The boots were heavy and old, and had once been good leather, and had not been good leather in some time. The voice that came down from above them was older still. "Mistress, let me take her from you." "In a moment. The pen is across the yard." "In a moment, sir." Brom Ironhand stood over her for a long beat. Then he did the thing she would remember later as the first kindness she had been given on Thornwood ground. He did not argue. He crouched down on the other side of the ewe and put his own hand under the burned foreleg to take the weight off her lap. He held it there until she had finished the binding. He did not speak again. He did not have to. When she stood up, the front of her dress was black to the knee. Her palms were red along the edge from where she had touched a beam she should not have touched. She did not show him her hands. She wiped them once on the inside of her apron and let the apron fall over the worst of it. She looked at last at the half circle of men. They were beginning to break apart, going back to whatever they had been doing before the smoke. Not one of them met her eyes as they passed. Above the yard, on the watchtower, a figure stood at the rail. Tall, arms folded, watching her, watching the ewe, watching Brahm, watching the dust the others raised as they walked away. She felt the weight of his, looking the way a person feels weather coming down from the north. She did not look up at the tower. She bent. She picked up the ewe by herself. She walked her to the pen. 3 days earlier, she had read the notice nailed to the post outside the chapel in Drywater Hollow, cheap parchment. Folded twice, the wax seal cracked. She had stood in front of it, with her hands rough from the laundry tubs. She had been bent over since dawn, and she had read it the way some people read a thing that might change their life, and are not yet sure whether the change will be a gift or a knife. Thornwood Keep. The notice, it said, Northern Boundary, seeking a woman of capable hands and steady character. Duties to include kitchen, preservation, and assistance with livestock and household as required. Bed and board provided. Wages paid by the moon. No prior letters of reference required. It was that last line that hooked her. No prior letters. Because Eleonora had no letters. She had no living family who could write one. She had no priest in any parish willing to put her name on a piece of paper above his own. She had no former mistress in any household who remembered her with affection. What she had was 2 strong arms, a back that had been broken once at 19 and rebuilt by the sort of work that does not ask permission, and the particular kind of quiet that looks like peace from a distance and is in fact only a person too tired to perform anything else. She pulled the notice down, folded it, put it inside the front of her dress against her ribs. No one in the square tried to stop her. She walked back to the laundry yard behind the inn. She finished the morning's wash, because the innkeeper's wife had paid for the morning's wash, and Eleonora did not take coin she had not earned. She wrung the last of the sheets. She hung them. She wiped her hands on her apron. She went inside. She said 3 words to the innkeeper's wife, who blinked at her once and did not argue. She climbed the back stair to the loft above the kitchen, where she had been sleeping for 14 weeks on a straw tick. She rolled the tick. She put her 3 spare shifts and her wooden comb and her mother's small horn-handled paring knife into the rolled tick. She came down the stair. She walked to the carter's stand at the south end of the square. The carter's stand was empty. It was empty for 2 hours. She sat on the bench beside the stand for the whole 2 hours. She did not eat. She did not drink. She watched the chapel post where the notice had been and counted, in her head, how many other women walked past it without stopping. 6. 6 women walked past that post in 2 hours. 2 of them paused. One of them squinted at the parchment a long moment, and then crossed herself and walked away. One of them read it twice and laughed once, short, and went on. Not one of them lifted a hand toward the wax. The carter came back at noon. He was a stooped old man called Doss, who smelled of leather and pipe smoke and onions. He looked at her on the bench with her rolled tick at her feet, and he looked at the chapel post where the wax was newly gone. And he did the small, honest arithmetic of a man who had been hauling things for 40 years. Thornwood. Yes, today. Today, sir. If you... I am going. Sit up front. The mule is a coward, and a kick from the cart will set him off again. She climbed up next to him. He did not ask her name for the first hour. He let the mule do the thinking. But at the second creek crossing, he glanced at her sideways the way old men do. When they are about to say something they have already decided to say. You know who Alpha Thornwood is? I read the notice. That is not what I asked you. She kept her hands folded on her knees. Watch the road. I know he is a lord who needs help. Old Doss made a sound that was not quite a laugh. He is a lord who had 400 head of sheep at the first thaw. Has maybe 180 now. Lost the wool contract with House Dawthorne in the Hare Moon. Lost his 2 best warriors to a rival pack in the Crow Moon. Lost his cook 3 weeks ago. She was quiet a moment. Why did the cook leave? Because Cale Thornwood is not an easy man to serve. Cruel. Not cruel. He shook his head once. Just particular. Got a way of looking at a person's makes them feel they are not measuring up even when they are doing the thing right. And he does not talk. Some folks find that unsettling. I do not need him to talk. The old man looked at her properly then. The way Carters look at women they have decided are not exactly what they first appeared to be. No, I reckon you do not. He chewed the inside of his cheek a moment. Mistress, I will say one more thing and then I will stop. The cook before this one, the one 3 weeks gone, she did not leave because of the alpha. She left because she heard a thing in the kitchen at night that she could not unhear. I do not know what the thing was. She would not tell me. I drove her south. She sat where you are sitting, and she did not speak the whole road. Just so you have it, Eleonora turned the corner of her mouth in. Once, I have it. Thank you, sir, he nodded. He did not bring it up again.
She smelled the fire before she saw the keep. The cart came over a low ridge, and the whole northern flat opened up below them. Old walls of dark gray stone, a square hall with 2 squat towers at the corners, a scatter of outbuildings on the lower side of the slope, a sheep pen long enough for 300 head, and most of it empty. And at the near edge of the yard, the blackened ribs of a barn still smoking thin gray into the noon sky. She sat up straighter on the bench. Old Doss saw her face. Mistress, that is fresh. That is fresh. Was not there when I drove the last load up 4 days back. He clicked the mule on. The mule did not want to. The mule had also smelled the burn, and was making, in his small, unenthusiastic way, his opinion known. Doss laid the rein along the mule's head flank with the lightness of a man who had been making this argument with this mule for 10 years. 3 men were standing near the burn, 2 younger, in the rough leather of warriors who had not seen any leisure in some time. 1 older. The older one was Brom Ironhand, although she did not know his name yet. A 4th man stood 20 paces apart from the other 3, with his arms crossed and his head tilted the way a man tilts his head when he is doing arithmetic in it that he does not enjoy. That was Cale Thornwood. She knew it before old Doss spoke. You did not need to be told. Some men carried their rank in their teeth. He carried his in the space he took up. The yard arranged itself around him, the way a room arranges itself around a fire. The 2 younger warriors stood a half-pace closer to him than they did to each other. Brom stood a half-pace farther, which was the older man's way of saying he was the one who would tell the Lord the truth when the truth came. The cart pulled in. Old Doss called out a name she did not catch. The alpha turned, walked toward them at an unhurried pace that was not slow and was not fast, and was exactly the pace of a man who has not been hurried by anyone in a long time. She did not wait for him to reach her. She climbed down on her own. She landed heavier than she meant to. The drop was longer than it looked. The familiar warm flush of being seen moved through her chest, and she shut it down the way a person shuts a door against weather they have lived with, too long to comment on. She straightened, smoothed the front of her dress, met his eyes. He was handsome. She was not going to lie to herself about that. Not the prettiness of courtmen. The other kind. The kind that years of cold air and physical work peeled down to function. Dark hair 2 weeks past a proper cut. A jaw that had not been near a razor for a few days. And eyes that were just then, in the noon light, an unusual yellow. Wolf, not gold. Yellow. The color old ambergris when it is held too close to a candle. He looked at her the way a man looks at a fence post that is leaning. Taking the measure of it. Calculating what it would take to set right, you answered the notice. I did. You have done preservation work. Yes. Salt mutton. Hard sausage. Rendered fat. Dried apples and pears. Smoked pork if you have the house for it. Livestock. My family ran a small holding. I know sheep, some goats. I can handle a draft horse. I do not pretend to know wolves. Something in his face did not move. But somewhere behind the not moving, a small thing adjusted. His eyes dropped the once, to the black at the front of her dress. You went in, there were animals inside, my men were closer, your men were not going in, a beat, a small one. He had not expected the answer. He had expected an apology for the boldness, or a softening, or a deferral. He had not expected the plain statement of fact. He looked at her the same length of time it took him to find a different word. You will take the room off the kitchen. He walked back toward the burned barn without one further word. Old Doss leaned down from the seat. He was almost smiling, told you. He does not talk much. She lifted her rolled tick down from the bench. She lifted her mother's small horn-handled paring knife in its wrap of oilcloth, separately, because the knife was the only thing she carried that her mother had ever owned. She thanked old Doss with both hands at her chest. She did not watch the cart go. She turned her face to the keep. A door stood open at the side of the hall. A kitchen door, by the line of smoke from a chimney that had not seen a clean draw in some time. She crossed to it. She stepped inside. She did not gasp. She did not let her shoulders fall. She set the rolled tick against the inside wall. She put her mother's knife on the shelf above the cold hearth. She rolled her sleeves to the elbow. The kitchen was bad. Bad the way a wound is bad when no one has changed the dressing in a week. Pots on the long table with last week's grease still sitting in them. Flour spilled on the boards and gone to paste in the damp. A flank of mutton hung from a beam that was on the wrong side of saving. The hearth was cold and had been cold so long that a black mouse had made a home in the ash bin and was, when she opened the lid, very politely outraged at the interruption. She tipped the bin into a sack. She carried the sack out the back door. She emptied the sack into the midden trench. She came back. She wiped the bin. She set new kindling. She drew a flint. She had the hearth lit, and the floor swept and the spoiled flank carried out, and a pot of bone broth going inside the second hour. She was not trying to be clever. She was working the way she had always worked. One thing, then the next thing. Without conversation. Because problems did not fix themselves. And standing in front of one, with your hands at your sides, did not count as honest labor.
She was elbow deep in dough when Brom Ironhand came in by the back door. He stopped. He saw the clean boards, the smoking hearth, the bread proofing under the cloth, the bones in the pot. He looked at her. He did not say what he was thinking, which was that the kitchen had not looked this way since his Alpha's mother had been alive, which had been a long time, and that the sight of it now made an old part of his chest do an old, uncomfortable thing. You the new one, Eleanor Vale, Brom Ironhand. He did not offer his hand. He tilted his head at the pot. What is going in there? Bones today. Salt pork tomorrow if you have any that has not turned. Bread now, when do the men eat? Sunrise, sun high. Sundown will not be many at table. 2 boys and me. And the Alpha when he remembers he is a man and not a wolf. Does he forget to eat? He forgets everything that is not the keep. He walked to the window, looked at the black ribs of the barn across the yard. He stood at the window the way a man stands at a window, who has been standing at that window for 30 years, and is now looking at a thing he did not expect to be looking at on any of those mornings. We lost the whole hay reserve last night. He was out there until first light, trying to save what he could. She worked the dough. How bad? He was quiet long enough that she looked up. Bad enough. Dry summer. Wells thin. Sheep dropping flesh. We lost the Dawthorne contract last moon because we could not promise the count. If something does not change before the first frost, there will not be a Thornwood. Keep to speak of by spring. She turned the dough, folded it, what burned. In the barn, winter feed reserve, all of it. And before you ask, no, I do not think it was an accident. She looked at him. He did not look back. He walked out. Lunch was 4 men who barely raised their eyes to her. The 2 younger warriors, Pier and Edrin. Boys really, 20 and 19 by the look of them. They ate fast and watched their bowls. Brom ate slow, said nothing. Cale Thornwood came in last, sat down, ate a full bowl of broth and 2 pieces of bread without appearing to taste either one of them. He was reading something while he ate, a ledger, pages of numbers, flipping with one hand, drinking with the other. She refilled his cup without being asked. He did not look up. She went back to the kitchen. She was not offended. She had worked in enough houses to know that being noticed was a luxury, not a wage, and she had not come to Thornwood Keep to be noticed. She had come because the notice had said no letters required. Because she was 26, and there was no one left who would write one for her anyway. And because, somewhere along the road between her father's grave and this kitchen, she had learned that when you have nothing left to lose, the most honest direction to walk in is straight at the hardest thing in the room. She was scrubbing the noon pot when she heard the argument outside. 2 voices, one the Alpha's low-controlled cadence, the other higher, smother. The voice of a man who had been taught somewhere that volume was beneath him. She did not stop scrubbing. She listened. You cannot keep bleeding losses like this, Thornwood. The Dawthorne contract was the last cushion you had. I know what it was, do you? Because from where I stand, it looks like you are running this keep on stubbornness and prayer. That has always been enough. A short, ugly laugh. Before. But this is not before, my friend. The wells are dropping. The north pasture will be useless inside a fortnight. Your winter feed, gone. You will forgive me in circumstances that are at the very least curious. and no lord with sense will look at this holding in its current state and call it worth the silver. A pause that had weight. I did not ask for a buyer. You may not have to ask. The way the next 2 moons go, you may not have a choice. The voice shifted, became almost warm, which made it worse. I am only saying, KL, if you are open to it, there are interested parties. Good coin. Enough to begin again somewhere the ground does not hate you. Somewhere smaller. Somewhere kinder. Long silence. Off my land. Blackmore. Footsteps. The sound of a horse. Then nothing. Eleonora dried the pot, set it on the shelf, stood for a moment with her hands flat on the boards. She thought about the burned barn. She thought about Brom Ironhand's word. Curious. She thought about the cook before this one, who had heard a thing in the kitchen at night that she could not unhear. She was beginning to understand the shape of a thing, though she did not have all of its edges yet. That evening she carried the supper cup of black tea out to the porch where Kale sat with the ledger again. He looked up when she set it down. You do not have to do that. The men can carry their own. It is no trouble. She turned to go. Vale. She stopped. Where did you come from? Before this, she turned back. He was looking at her directly. The same measuring look. Something different inside of it now. I moved about. Worked a kitchen east of Harnwich for 2 seasons. Took in washing before that. A small holding before that. Where was the holding? East. It is gone now. He watched her. Gone how? She met his eyes. Drought then debt. Then it did not belong to us anymore. She paused. I know what the end of a thing looks like, my lord. If that is what you were asking. Something crossed his face that she could not name. That is not what I was asking. She waited. He looked back down at the ledger. The supper was good. First decent meal this kitchen has made in a month. It was not much. It was not anywhere close to enough. But it was something. She went back inside. Stood in the warm dark of the kitchen for the length of one breath. Let herself feel it. The small, stubborn coal she had been carrying in her chest since she was 23 years old. Then she folded the feeling away and went back to the dough. She was up before the sky paled. The keep was quiet in the particular way of places that are exhausted rather than restful. She lit the hearth, set the iron, went to the back step with her hands wrapped around her own first cup, and stood there looking out over the land. It was dry, visibly. The kind of dry that did not happen in a week. The grass in the near pasture was straw-colored. The well rope hung lower than rope should hang in summer. The sheep she could hear in the far pen sounded thin, but she was looking past all of that. She was looking at the land the way her father had taught her to look at land before the holding went under. And he went under not long after. Reading the slope. Reading the runoff. Reading the places where the soil color changed without any reason a man with a plow could give you. And there, at the base of the long, low ridge to the north, past the line of an old boundary wall she had not yet been close to, she saw it, a patch of ground that was not the color of the ground around it, darker, slightly, even in this drought. A line of low scrub that had no business being green and was green anyway. The faintest depression in the slope where the eye wanted to slide off and not look. She stood very still. She thought of her father at the kitchen table of the old holding, with his hand on a stub of charcoal, drawing for her the way water moved through the bones of a piece of ground. Not the way it moved on top, the way it moved underneath. He had drawn her the picture 3 times in 3 different springs, the last time she had been 16 and impatient and had said so. He had set the charcoal down and looked at her and said, plainly, you will be the one who needs this. Not your brother, you. He had been wrong about her brother, because there had been no brother by the next winter. He had not been wrong about her. It might be nothing. It might be everything. She did not speak of it at breakfast. She did not speak of it to Brom. She served. She cleared. She watched Pier and Edrin shovel down porridge with the appetite of young men who have stopped pretending they are full. And in the early afternoon, she found the gap-toothed one. Pier, in the yard, I want to look at the north line. For a still-room question. Which way, he pointed. She walked it alone. The ridge was farther than it looked from the back step, and the day was hotter than a day in late summer had any right to be. And by the time she stood at the patch of darker ground, her shift was wet through and her feet were beginning to make their complaint heard. She knelt. She put her bare hand flat against the earth. She closed her eyes. Cool. Distinctly. Slightly damp under the crust. Water, there is water here, not at the surface. Deep. 8, 10 paces down, maybe more. But it was there, and she was certain of it with the kind of certainty that does not come out of a book and cannot be argued with by a man who has never put his hand to soil. She opened her eyes, looked at the ridge, looked at the old boundary wall running east and west along its foot, old work. The kind of wall lords had built when nobody thought about what was under the ground. Stone posts driven down deep, bound with iron, driven straight through whatever path the water had been quietly keeping for itself before any house carried the name Thornwood. She walked the length of the wall. Slowly, she counted the posts, 43 between the elbow at the east end and the point where the line turned south at the western corner. She rested her palm on the side of every fifth one. She did not know what she was hoping to feel through stone. She knew only that her father had touched the posts of the old holding before he had touched anything else when the wells began to thin, and that he had been right about the posts even when the bailiff had laughed. She stood up. She brushed her skirts. She walked back to the keep. Cale was in the yard when she came over the rise of Samus, in conversation with Brom in the low, careful tone men used when they did not want to be overheard. Both of them stopped talking at the same instant. He looked at her, at the state of her. Dust on her skirts, sweat on her brow, hair coming loose at the side. Where have you been? Walking the north pasture, my lord. That was not in our arrangement. No, she did not look away. But I think we need to speak of your water. Something flickered behind his eyes. And what do you think you know about my water? She drew in a breath, steadied her voice, made it the voice her father had used when he wanted a man to listen instead of laugh. I think you have more water on this holding than you know about, and I think the old boundary wall along the north ridge is the reason your wells cannot find it. Along quiet. Brom did not move. Cale did not move. You walked my boundary. I did. To answer a still-room question. She held his eyes. I may have been curious about more than that. The quiet got longer. Then Brom Ironhand made a sound. Not a laugh, something on the edge of one. He covered it the way a man covers a cough at chapel. Cale did not look amused, but he did not look dismissive either. He looked at her the way he had in the yard at noon. Fence post, calculating, and something behind it had shifted. Inside. Show me on the map. She followed him. The hall was cool after the yard. Stone walls, hide rugs that had seen better lords than this one. A long oak table that had been used for more arguments than meals. He unrolled a map across it, weighted one curl with a clay cup, weighted the other with the side of his fist. Show me where. She put her finger on the line of the ridge, traced it east. Stopped at the place where the wall ran below. Here, the soil is darker, even in this heat, and cooler than it should be by half. He looked at where her finger was. Then he looked at her. That ground has been dry as long as this keep has stood. Then something changed. Or something is blocking it. She drew her hand back. When was the wall set? He glanced at Brom. Before my time, before his father's time, near enough. Stone posts, iron. They were driven deep when a man's word ran for 100 years. How deep? 2 strides. Maybe more. Elenara nodded slowly. If those posts went down through a vein that ran under the ridge, and the ground settled around them across the years, water finds its path. When you block the path long enough, it either finds another way or it backs up. Either way, what is downstream goes dry, along quiet in the hall. Cale looked at the map. His jaw worked once. You are saying, a wall older than I am may be choking my wells. I am saying it is possible. I am saying it is worth looking at. She met his eyes. I am not saying I am right. I am saying I have seen ground behave this way before. On my father's holding. We did not understand it in time. She let the silence hold, 1 beat longer than was comfortable. I would rather you looked and proved me wrong than did not look. He stared at the map. Then he straightened. Tomorrow. We ride the north line. Brom nodded the once. The way old soldiers agreed with a thing. She turned toward the hearth, because the supper still needed turning, and the bread was nearly ready, and the world had not stopped to celebrate the fact that a map had been opened. Vale, she turned. You come too. She did not let it show on her face. She nodded. She went back to the kitchen. Her hands, where neither of them could see, were trembling. Not from fear, from the other thing. The thing she had learned to handle with the same care she gave to a horse she did not yet know. She did not sleep that night. She sat by the hearth and watched the coals breathe. Morning came hot and without wind. The kind of morning that told you exactly what kind of day was coming for you. She had breakfast on the table before any of them were up. She was not trying to prove anything. She simply could not stay in bed. The boys came in first, Pier and Edrin. They ate the way young men eat when they are uncertain of the day, sideways glances passing between them, one of them about to ask a thing and the other one elbowing him out of it. Pier was the one who finally spoke. "You really think there is water under the North Ridge?" "Mistress." She set fresh bread on the table. "I think it is possible. Edrin and me. We walked that line plenty. Never seemed anything special. Most things do not seem special until you know what to look at." Edrin looked up. He was the quieter one. 19, though his face still carried the last of its boyhood at the corners of the mouth. "What do you look at?" She considered the question. Considered him. Considered that no one had ever asked her that particular question in a kitchen. Color. Temperature. The way a plant grows where it should not be able to. The way the ground settles in one place and not another. She paused. Land talks. Most folk just have never been taught the words. Edrin was quiet for a moment. "You sound like a holding child." "I was. Until I was not," he nodded slowly. The way young men sometimes nod when they recognize a sorrow they have not lived through, but have stood near. Brom came in, poured his own cup, stood at the window. Kale came in last, sat down, ate fast. He did not bring the ledger. That alone told her something. His mind was already at the ridge, already running the lines she did not yet have access to. He pushed back. "Stewed, let us ride." They went out in a line. Kale first. Brom on his left. Elenera on a patient old mare Brom had saddled without being asked. Pier riding behind because Edrin had been left to the flock. She had not been on a horse in 2 summers. Her body remembered before her mind did. The shift of weight. The rhythm. The way you stop fighting the motion and let the animal carry you. The mare was patient and slow, and that suited her down to the boots. Kale set a pace that was not a punishment and was not a stroll. They came to the foot of the ridge inside the half hour. He pulled up, looked at the wall. The wall was old. You could feel the age of it without touching the stones. Posts dark with 2 centuries, iron pitted and pocked. He dismounted, walked to the nearest post, crouched, pressed his palm flat to the dirt at the base. She slid down. Stood where she had stood the day before, pressed her boot toe to the ground, still cool, still subtle, still there. "Feel here," she said to Brom. He crouched beside her, pressed his palm to the earth, lifted it, pressed again. That one sound from Brom Ironhand was worth more than a paragraph from any other man on the holding. Kale came over, pressed his own hand to the ground, held it. Held it long enough that Pier, watching from horseback, leaned forward in the saddle. Kale stood. Looked at her. "You said 2 strides deep." "That is what Brom said." He looked at the wall, at the long line of it east and west along the foot of the ridge. Something was working behind his eyes. She could see it the way you can see a fire. Working behind a shutter. "If we are wrong," he said, "we pull a wall that did not need pulling and we are out 2 days of labor." "Yes, and if we are right," it was not a question. She answered it anyway. "If we are right, you get your water back." A long beat. Then he looked at Brom. "Bring the iron bars." That was the moment. She would think about it later. The way a person remembers the exact slant of light on a particular afternoon. The Alpha King of Thornwood Keep. With his ledger left on the table and his hand still smelling of damp earth. Deciding to trust a kitchen woman with the bones of his land. They did not pull the wall that day. There was not light enough. The work would take preparation and the right tools, and KL was not a man who moved without preparation. But something had changed by the time they rode back. The quality of the quiet between them was no longer distance. It was concentration. They pulled the wall on the 3rd morning. Iron bars, 4 men, the kind of work that does not allow conversation. Kale leading, Brom on the 2nd post. Pier and Edrin trading the heavier bar between them and pretending the weight did not register in their young shoulders. Elenara, at the verge of the labor with water and bread and a strip of cloth for whoever cut himself first. The first 6 posts came out clean, dry holes. crumbled iron at the base where centuries had eaten the bindings. The men were beginning by the sixth to glance at each other in the slow, private way of laborers who suspect their lord has set them to a fool's errand and are too well trained to say so. She watched the seventh from 20 paces away. She knew before they pulled it. Something in the way the earth at its foot sat. Something in the slight depression around the stone that the eye almost forgave. Her father had a word for it, a word he had used at her in the small kitchen at the old holding the spring before everything went, and she had laughed at him for it, then because she was 16 and laughed at most things her father said. The post came free. The hole at its base was wet, not damp, wet, dark and glinting in the late morning light the way a wound is dark before it finishes bleeding. Pierre made a sound that was not a word. Edrin dropped to his knees in the dirt and put his hand into the hole and brought it up with mud on his fingers and stared at it as if he were holding a relic. Brom looked at Kale. Kale looked at her. She did not smile. It was too soon for smiling. They had a hole in the ground and dark mud and a long way still to go before any of it meant what they needed it to mean. But she let herself breathe, fully, for the first time since the burned barn. And she held his eyes for one steady moment before she made herself look back at the hole, pull the next 3 east, and 3 west. Give the channel room to move. Nobody questioned it. They pulled. The 8th post came out wetter than the 7th. The 9th wetter than the 8th. The 10th was the one where the seep became a thread. The thread became a thin run, and the thin run began to find the small natural fall of the ground east of the ridge and to follow it. By the middle hour the water was moving. Nothing dramatic. A slow dark seep that widened as the ground adjusted to the pressure it had been holding for 200 years. It moved east along the natural fall of the land, finding a channel that had been there long before any wall, long before any keep, long before any man had spoken the name Thornwood out loud at all. Kale did not speak for a long time. He walked the line of the new flow. He crouched. He set his hand into the wet of it. He brought his hand up. He looked at his palm. He looked at the line of the ridge above them. He looked at his men. He looked last at her. Vale, yes, you will be at the head of my table tonight, my lord. I have not finished. You will be at the head of my table tonight. The boys will sit on either side. Brom will sit at the foot. I will sit where the cook sat. The kitchen will eat first, and then the kitchen will tell us what it would like done, with the pasture below the ridge. By stag moon? She did not have a ready answer for that, so she did not give one. She bent. She picked up the cloth she had brought for cuts. She handed it to Edrin, who had skinned his knuckle on the head of the iron bar 2 posts back, and who had been too proud to say so. She walked back toward the keep to start the supper that had just become a sitting. The sheep found the water before noon. That was the way of sheep. You did not lead them. You did not show them. Something in them recognized water the way starving things recognize bread. The first ewe lifted her head from the pale grass and turned without any human guiding her. The rest followed. Edrin laughed out loud. He probably would have been ashamed of the sound if anyone had remarked on it. No one did. Pierre was grinning so wide his mouth seemed at risk of damage. Brom put his hands on his hips and shook his head once, which in Brom was the equivalent of a hymn. That night at the long oak table she sat where he had told her to sit. She did not protest. Protest would have been a kind of vanity. She sat. She poured for the boys. She poured for Brom. She poured for him last. He looked at her across the bowls. Thank you, 2 words. Said the way he said everything, without ornament. Do not thank me yet. The water is moving. That is the beginning. Not the end, he almost smiled, the faintest correction at the corner of his mouth. She caught it, and she did not let herself examine why it stayed with her longer than it should have. 2 days passed, days where the new flow held and widened, days where the troughs in the east pen came alive again, days where Pierre could be heard in the yard, singing under his breath, a boy in love with his own future. Days where Brom Ironhand stopped at the kitchen door 3 different times to look at the loaf cooling on the board and to nod the once before going back out, which was, for Brom, a small, steady kind of approval that she had come to value more than louder praise from louder men. On the 3rd morning, Berkare came to the back step at first light, with his mouth flat in a way it had not been since the burned barn. Mistress. The big bay, she set the iron down. Show me. The bay was Kale's own warhorse. A heavy black-maned stallion who had served the Alpha through 2 border skirmishes and had earned, by his service, the right to die in old hay on a quiet hillside many years from now, down in the long pen. Forelegs braced, neck low, breath coming through nostrils that were beginning to crust with something dark. Elenara knelt beside it, the way her father had taught her to kneel beside a sick beast. Hand to the chest, counting heartbeats against the count of breaths. Listening to the cadence under the ribs. She knew before she stood up. Send for Master Henrik. Master Henrik is at Ironford until tomorrow. Send for him anyway. Send Edrin. Now Pier ran. She did not stay with the bay alone for long. Kale was at her shoulder inside 3 minutes. He had heard the running boots from across the yard. Drought? No. Sickness in the throat. The moraine? No, my lord. She looked up at him from her knee. Smell the muzzle. He bent. He breathed. His face did the thing it had done the night of the ram, which had died in the inner pen 2 evenings before the burning of the barn, and which she had not yet thought about clearly enough to name. The face went quiet from the inside out. Master Henrik came in by lamplight at second dark. Small man, compact, hands like the hands of a man who had been delivering both babies and bad news for 40 years. He examined the bay, examined the trough, examined the rim of the water bucket. He scraped a thin smear of something from the inside of the wooden lip into a piece of folded paper and held it close to the flame. Wolfsbane. Mixed with mercury salts, he did not look up. Apothecary's poison. Somebody paid coin for this, and whoever paid did not pay for sport. This was bought to kill. Kale said nothing for a long moment. How many doses in that smear? Enough to drop a horse this size. Enough left over for the rest of your pen if the wind had blown another way. The bay died at sundown. Kale put it down himself with a blade rather than let it linger. He did not ask Pier to do it. He did not ask Brom. He walked into the pen with the long knife and walked out with it red and went to the trough and emptied it himself. He came into the kitchen after. He did not eat. He stood at the hearth with his hands flat on the mantel. Elenara set the rag down. Kale. Yes, this is not one bad neighbor. No, this is a man with patience, and a plan he has been working since before you noticed he was working it. He nodded once. He did not turn. Will you sit? I will stand. She let him stand. But what no one in that kitchen knew yet was this. Elenara had seen those exact tracks at a trough before, the same dark slick on the wood, the same pattern of vomit and froth in the dirt, the same slow strangling of a family that had refused, 3 winters running, to sell. 3 years on her father's land. And back then, no one had believed her until the holding itself was sold from under their feet, and her mother was buried inside the season after. She did not say so. Not yet. She was not ready to lay that piece on this table. She had been carrying it for so long that the weight of it had become part of how she stood. Setting it down would change her shape in front of him. And she did not yet trust that her shape, when changed, would still be useful to the kitchen, or to the keep, or to him. She poured him a cup of small beer he did not drink. She poured one for herself she did not drink either. What do you need from me? He turned his head, looked at her. The lamp shadow cut across half his face. How did Blackmore know? Know what, my lord? That my wells were thinning. Before I knew. He was offering coin for this land 4 moons ago. 4 moons. He had a number in his mouth before I had a worry in mine. She watched him. Either he had a man inside this keep telling him, or he made it happen. A long pause. Both. Probably, he let his head drop forward the once. The line of his shoulders did the small specific thing the shoulders of men do when they have stopped, for a single private breath, trying to be lords. He gathered himself again. He lifted his head. He looked at her. Vale? Yes. Do you trust me to hold the next moon? Yes, why? Because you did not laugh at the wall. He held that one a moment. He almost said a thing. He did not say it. He nodded the once. He went out the back step into the dark of the yard. She washed the cup he had not drunk from. She washed her own. She set them on the shelf. She stood at the window with her hands on the boards and looked at the lamp. Pier had set burning in the pen against any wolf that might come down from the ridge. The lamp burned steady. The ridge was quiet. The new water moved east in its low, slow line. She thought of her mother for the first time in many weeks. She thought of the small horn-handled paring knife on the shelf above her own hearth. She thought of the warrant she had not yet seen, and would not see for almost a full moon more. That would carry her father's name as the first of 7. She turned the loaf. She set it on the rack to cool. She went to bed. She did not sleep. She lay awake until the sky began to gray, and listened to the slow, careful step of a wolf walking the inside line of the wall under her window. She did not need to look to know whose wolf it was. He was walking the perimeter himself. The alpha, in the other shape, keeping the watch he had been too proud to ask a man to keep for him. 3 mornings later, a courier rode up the long road from the south, carrying a sealed letter from a man who called himself an advocate of the royal bench and an interested party. Blackmore's lawyer. Lord Vorth Blackmore was, the letter said in the rounded, careful hand of a clerk who had been paid by the hour, prepared to increase his offer for the Thornwood, holding in light of the difficulties the keep had been suffering. Generous coin. Quiet sale. No need of court. Cale read the letter at the table, set it down, lit it from the candle, watched it curl in the empty bowl until there was nothing left but black flake. He is escalating. Yes, because we found the water, because we found the water and the trough at the same time. He cannot afford for both pieces to sit in the same room much longer. He looked at her across the table. The morning light on his hands. You said you have seen this before. She did not answer for a moment. On my father's land. How did it end? It ended with my father in a hole behind the chapel and my mother in the hole next to him before the next harvest, because we believed that being in the right would be enough. Because we did not move when we should have moved. She made herself keep her voice level. It will not end that way here. If you let me work, he held her eyes. He did not flinch from what she had told him. That was the first gift he had given her, although neither of them would have called it a gift out loud. Tell me what you want to do. She drew breath. Let me go to the market at Drywater, tomorrow. Not as your woman, not as anyone's woman, as a kitchen's mistress on a small holding, buying flour, buying thread, buying nothing that would be remembered. And listening, no, he is expecting you to fight back like a lord. He is not expecting me at all. That is the only reason it works. No, Cale, his jaw worked if he marks you. If even one of his men marks you on that road, I will not be marked. I will be a country woman in a brown shawl buying salt, which is what I would have been in that town 5 summers ago, and what I am still, when I am away from this keep. He looked at his own hands as if they had betrayed him. He had been about to say a different word. He had stopped himself a half-breath short. She did not let her face move. I will be a country woman in a brown shawl. That is the cover. Let me work. He was quiet a long beat. Brom rides at the edge of the road. You will not see him. You will not speak to him. But he will be there, agreed. And Vale? Yes, if anything in that town, anything, feels wrong. You walk to the chapel and you sit in the chapel until Brom comes inside to fetch you. You do not be brave. You do not be clever. You go to the chapel. I will go to the chapel. He looked at her 1 beat longer. I lost a horse the night before last. I will not lose more. That was the closest he had come, in 3 weeks, to a sentence with her in it. She went the next morning. Old Doss, the carter, took her. The cart was the same one she had ridden in on. Which was, she would think later, the point of the whole disguise. A woman seen arriving twice was a woman who belonged. She did her actual list. Flour, coarse salt, thread, a small twist of dried apples for Edrin, who had a sweet tooth he was ashamed of. She did it at 3 different stalls. She let the women at each stall complain at her about the dry well at the chapel and the dry well at the smithy and the dry well at the priest's house. She agreed. She nodded. She let them get used to her face. Then she walked into old Raffert's supply store. Raffert was the clearinghouse. Every town has one. The store that is also the news. The barrels of nails that are also the place arguments come to die. She moved through it slowly, the way a woman moves who is not in a hurry because nobody is hurrying her. She read labels she did not need to read. She asked after thread she already had. She let the conversation in the store wash around her. It found the topic she wanted inside the quarter hour. Heard the king's bailiff was out at Thornwood twice last fortnight. Once, twice. My cousin's boy carries the post and he counts. Why twice? A complaint. From a neighbor. About water. From Blackmore. Did not say, did not need to say. A laugh. The kind that is more bitter than the joke deserves. Elinara moved another 2 paces down the aisle, stopped at a low shelf where dark glass jars sat behind a small painted sign that read "Not for household use." She turned to Raffert at the counter, made her face the face of a woman with a problem she had been putting off. "My back garden has gotten away from me, sir. Thistle. The whole bed. What would you put on it?" Raffert came down off his stool, named 2 preparations, pointed. She tilted her head, pretended to think. "A neighbor told me there was a kind that has a smell of metal in it. Worked at her thistle in a fortnight." "Cannot remember the name," Raffert frowned. "That is not what I would put on thistle, mistress. That is the apothecary's preparation. We keep it for vermin in the granaries, not for a garden." "Oh, then no. Hard to come by, even for vermin. We only had a sack last quarter and that went out as a special order." She let her face open, lightly, into the look women use when they are interested without admitting they are interested. "A special order. £20. Cash on the table." Buyer wanted it fast and wanted it quiet. He caught himself, heard the shape of what he had just said. Looked at her. He was a careful man. Carefulness had built his counter, anyway. "For thistle, I would go with the lime. Lime, then." "Thank you." She bought a small measure of lime she would dump in the midden the moment she got home. She thanked him. She walked out to the cart. She sat next to old Doss, the carter, for the length of 1 full breath before she let her hands shake. "Did you get what you needed?" "I got more than I needed." She wrote it that evening at the kitchen table with the door closed. Every line of the exchange. The way Raffert's face had shifted at the word metal. The number of pounds. The phrase quiet. The hour Blackmore was named in the aisle without being named. She wrote it the way her father had taught her to write a letter to a magistrate, as if the magistrate were already bored and looking for a reason to throw the page in the fire. Short sentences. Dates, the exact words. Her signature at the bottom of every page. She slid it across the table to K.L. He read it twice. £20. Yes. 6 weeks ago. Yes, he was buying poison 6 weeks ago. The Dawthorne contract fell apart 2 moons ago. The Warriors left 7 weeks ago. He laid the page flat. His knuckles were white at the joints. "He has been building this for 4 moons. And I have been telling myself it was a dry summer." "You were telling yourself the thing you could survive. That is what men do. That is not what I am paid to do, Vale." She did not answer. She let him sit with it. The bailiff came 2 mornings after. Sandy hair under a felt cap. A cloak that had been good once. The badge of the King's Bench on a chain at his throat that he had polished that morning. Because he was the kind of man who polished his badge in the dark before sunrise. He gave his name as Bailiff Dunmar of the Western Circuit, and he did not get off his horse for the first sentence. "Alpha Thornwood. A complaint has been entered. Diversion of natural waters, affecting the eastern boundary of the holding of Lord Voreth Blackmore. Diversion. That is the word, my lord. From which complaint I am not at liberty." Cale's stillness was the stillness of a man deciding which neck to break first. He said nothing for so long that Bailiff Dunmar shifted in his saddle. Elinara stepped into the doorway, "My lord." "Sir, if I may." Dunmar looked at her. The quick measuring look of a king's man who has not expected a kitchen apron at a property dispute. His eyes moved over her without lighting. "You are Elinara Vale. I keep the household. This is not a household matter, mistress. I think it may be of help to your inquiry, sir. I was present when the boundary work was done. I have the older surveys to hand, if you would step in. There is fresh bread and the morning is hot." Dunmar hesitated. He was a careful man with not enough power. The fresh bread did something for him that her dress would not. He dismounted. She brought him to the hall, spread the old map, set the bread within reach. Brom was at the wall, K.L. at the head of the table. She stood at the bailiff's elbow, as if she had been doing this for 10 years, and not 10 minutes. She talked. For half an hour she talked. She talked about the natural fall of the ground. She talked about the elevation marks on the map, and what they implied about an older channel. She used the word hydrology twice, and explained it both times to a bailiff who had never met the word before, as if she were explaining it for his comfort, and not because she was uncertain whether the word covered the case. She pointed to the foot of the ridge. She pointed to the old wall. She described, with quiet authority, a survey she did not have, that they would have completed and signed by the end of the moon, and could of course be presented at his convenience. Brom was a stone at the wall. Cale had not moved one finger on the oak. The bailiff closed his book. "And the survey will be lodged when? End of the moon. I will need to see it before I close the inquiry, of course. We will lodge it with your circuit clerk." He nodded. He drank the last of his cup. He left. The hall was so silent for the time it took his horse to reach the gate. Then Cale said, without looking up, "We do not have a survey. No. You just told a king's bailiff we would lodge one with his clerk inside the moon. Yes. Which means we now have to find a surveyor, hire a surveyor, and complete a survey of the North Ridge inside 3 weeks. Yes. How?" She allowed herself the smallest breath. "You will pay for it from the next Dawthorne advance. Dawthorne is no longer in contact with me. You will write Dawthorne tonight, telling him you have water. Telling him you will have flock numbers by Crow Moon. Telling him you would like to revisit terms. He pulled out because of the Count. The Count is recoverable. He is a buyer, not an enemy. He will come back." Cale looked at her. "That is 12 different things you have just decided 11. The 12th is yours." The corner of his mouth moved. Not a smile. The honest version of one. "Which is worth more?" He wrote the letter that night. He showed her the draft after the boys were asleep. He pushed it across the table the way men push a thing they are not yet able to ask about out loud. She read it. The first paragraph held. The second held. The third went soft at the seams. "This part. Sounds like you are sorry. He does not need you sorry. He needs you ready." She struck through the line with the side of her thumb, wrote a sentence underneath in her own neat hand. He read it. "Read it again. Do you write to magistrates often?" Vale once. "To no purpose." "I learned from the loss." He folded the letter into the wax, sealed it. That was the night they began to sit. Not late, not long, 20 minutes at the hearth after the boys were down, he on the bench, she on the stool, both of them with cups of small beer they were not drinking. Brom would put his head in once, take stock, and leave them. Pier and Edrin pretended they slept through it. They did not. The boys were proud of their lord and proud of their mistress in a way they would not have been able to name. They lay in the warrior's room and listened to the low murmur of the voices at the hearth and counted it among the reasons they would not desert by harvest. The second of those nights he asked her how she had learned to read ground. "My father." He held land, a small holding, east of Harnwich, 80 acres, 12 milking goats, a barley field. A garden my mother kept that fed half the village in the long winter. And there were 3 years when his sheep died one at a time. When his oats came up sick. When his neighbor offered first to buy, and then to lend, and then to buy again. My father went to the bailiff. He went to the priest. He went to the small court at Harnwich. They wrote his words down and threw the writing in a drawer. The neighbor became a lord by purchase. My father became a man in a chair by the window. My mother became a stone. How long ago? 3 winters. And the neighbor, he is rich, sir. He is in a fine house. He is the sort of man bailiffs would not be sent after. He looked at her a moment. What was his name? It does not matter. He is far from here. She did not look at him as she said it. He let it go. He did not let it go the way men let things go because they are tired of hearing them. He let it go the way a man lets go of a thing he has decided to hold quietly in a different place. His hand crossed the boards, settled lightly over the back of hers, did not stay. The weight of it was less than the weight of a candle. He took it away again. Neither of them spoke of it. 2 mornings later, before the sun was fully up, a rider came down the long road from the south. A man neither of them had seen before. Plain dark cloak, king's seal at the chest. A face the way a careful man wears his face, closed, neither warm nor cold. The kind of face that listened. He gave the name Aldrich. Inquisitor of the Royal Bench Western Circuit. He had ridden from the capital. He had been written to by Brom Ironhand's cousin, who served at the Hall of Records in the city. He had read the letter twice and ridden the same week. He sat at her oak table. He drank her tea. He listened to Cale lay out the burned barn, the dead ram, the poisoned trough, the dead bay, the apothecary's smear in the wood. He listened to Elenara lay out Raffert and the 20-pound and the quiet sale. He listened the way some men listen, as if he were filling drawers in his mind, one at a time, and labeling each drawer as he went. When the 2 of them were done, he sat for a long moment, with his hands folded around the cup. Mistress Vale, I would ask you something, and I would ask you to take a breath before you answer. Yes, sir, you said your father held a small holding, east of Harnwich. 3 winters passed. Yes, sir. You said the neighbor became a lord by purchase. Yes, sir. Was your father's name Aaron Vale? The kitchen was very quiet. She put both her hands flat on the table. She did not let her face do what her face wanted to do. She made the breath the Inquisitor had asked for. Yes. He looked at her for a long beat. He nodded once, slowly, almost gently. Mistress Vale, I am going to tell you a thing now. I am going to tell it once, and I am going to tell it clean. And after I tell it, I am going to take you and your lord through what it means. Do you understand me? Yes, sir. Your father's holding was not lost to drought. Your father's holding was the first of 7 that have been taken across the western counties by the same network of buyers using the same pattern. Poisoned wells, sick beasts, burned reserves, pressed sales, bailiffs they had bought, lawyers they had bought. A name they shared between them when they wrote each other letters they were careful to burn. They called themselves the Iron Crown Conclave. Voreth Blackmore signs his letters with their mark. So do the lords of 3 holdings to the east of him. She did not move. She did not breathe. She listened. Your mother wrote to my office 2 winters ago. The letter sat in a stack with 3 other letters from 3 other widows of 3 other holdings. We did not see the pattern until the 5th widow. I am sorry to tell you that. I am more sorry than I can say in this room. We see it now. Her hands were still flat on the boards. She was looking at the grain in the wood. She was counting the knots. There were 11 in the tabletop. She had cleaned it 9 times since she came. She had never counted the knots. She had carried it for 3 winters that her father had failed. She had carried it as a kind of weight in the chest she did not put down even at sleep. She had told herself she should have been smarter, older, quicker to her feet. She had told herself, in the long nights after her mother died, that perhaps somewhere in the body of her father a thing had broken that she should have seen breaking. He had not failed. He had been hunted, and the same hunters were now standing under her hearth. Her eyes burned. She did not let them spill. She lifted the back of her wrist, wiped it once across the lash. Dry, sir. Yes, mistress. What do you need from me? What you have already given me. The written account. The willingness to stand at a royal bench. The quiet of this house for as long as it takes me to draw a warrant. 2 moons. Maybe less. He looked across the table at Kale. Alpha, I will be honest with you. The ones who burn the barns are nothing. We can hang them in a row and Conclave does not feel the rope. What we want are the men who write the letters. I think your neighbor will write a letter inside the next moon. I think he will write it because he is now afraid. I think we will read that letter before he posts it. I will need you. Not to act, to wait. Can you wait? Kale did not answer for a long beat. He was watching her. Not the Inquisitor, I can wait, Mistress Vale. Yes, sir. Will you take a moment now? There is no shame in a moment. She shook her head. The smallest shake. It was not a refusal of his kindness. It was a refusal of the alternative. My father did not see them coming. Kale will? She stood up. She poured the Inquisitor more tea. She did not look at Kale as she poured. Because if she had, she might not have managed to keep the kettle level. Inquisitor Aldrich drank the 2nd cup slowly. He said he would lodge in the village inn for 10 days, watching the road. He named the deputy he had brought, who would lie low at the tavern at Drywater. He named the man at the bench in the city who was already pulling Raffert's ledger under writ. He named the seal he would carry in his inside pocket, with a fresh warrant of arrest signed, and only the name and date left blank. He did all this without raising his voice once. Then he stood. He bowed to Kale the small bow of one careful man to another. He laid 2 fingers, lightly, on the back of Eleonora's hand as he passed her at the door. Mistress. Sir, see, he is afraid of you, you know. The neighbor. I have read his last 3 letters. Of me, sir. Of you. Specifically, he named you by description. Twice. A man does not name a kitchen mistress in 2 letters in 1 moon, unless she has wakened him in the night. He was gone before she could find a reply. She closed the door. She turned. She walked back to the table. She sat down across from Kale. Her hands were in her lap because she did not trust them on the boards. He looked at her. Vale, yes. I want you to listen to a thing. I am listening. 3 winters ago, a girl I do not know watched her father be killed by a man with a clean coat and a quiet voice. And the bench at Harnwich did nothing. And the priest at Harnwich did nothing. And the neighbors did nothing. And she carried it. By herself. From a kitchen in Harnwich to a kitchen at Drywater to this kitchen here. Kale, let me finish. She let him. That man you would not name. He will be brought to the bench. Inside this year, whether or not it is my bench, whether or not it is my coin, whether or not it is my arm at the end of the rope, he will be brought. You will not be standing alone when he is brought. Not because as I am soft, because I am not. Because it has been a long time since this house had any business under it worth standing for, and it does now. Do you hear me? She heard him. She made herself nod the once. She did not say what was in her throat, which was that the part of her chest that had felt cold for 3 years had been moving all morning, like an ember that had been turned over in the ash. She did not say it, because saying it would have undone the last of the steadiness she had left for the day's work. She went to the hearth. She turned the loaf. She did not look at him while she turned the loaf. He sat at the table behind her for another long minute. Then she heard him stand. Then she heard him cross the boards. He stopped at her shoulder. He did not touch her. Vale? Yes, they took your father. They will not take this. I know. He went out by the hall door. The latch dropped with the small private sound that latches make when a man closes them quietly. She put both her hands flat on the boards above the hearth. She let the breath she had been holding go. It came out in a long single line that surprised her when it had finished, by how long it had been waiting. Outside in the pen, the new water moved east in its slow dark line. The sheep at the far end of the pen lifted their heads as a flight of crows passed over. In the woods above the keep, the wolves of his pack were not yet calling. They were waiting. They were watching the road from the south. They had begun, in the last 2 nights, to take that road in twos. And inside the kitchen, the woman the neighbor had named twice in his letters stood with her wrists pressed to the warm stone of the hearth and counted again the 11 knots in the table she had cleaned 9 times. She counted them until her hands were steady. She did not turn back to the loaf for a long beat after the hands stopped trembling. She thought, instead, of the small horn-handled paring knife on the shelf above her. She thought of the morning her mother had given it to her at the threshold of the old kitchen. Her mother had not made a speech of it. Her mother had not made speeches of anything. Her mother had laid the knife in her palm and closed her fingers around the handle and said only, "You will have this when I am dead. You may as well take it now." She had been 15. She thought of her father at the chair by the window in the season after the holding had been sold. He had not been able to lift his head from the chair to look at her on the last morning. He had been able only to move 2 fingers, by way of greeting, against the wool blanket she had drawn across his knees. He had not been able by then to speak. He had not had to. They had sat together for the morning. The light had come in through the window and laid itself across his hands. She had held his hand until the fingers stopped moving. She had not let go for a long time after. She had carried that morning, like a coal in a pocket, for 3 winters. She had carried it through a chapel and a road and a laundry yard and a loft above and in. She had carried it because she had been afraid that if she set it down, the cold of the years would put itself in the place where the coal had been. She did not set it down. She moved it. She lifted the coal out of the old pocket. She put it, carefully, into the new hearth she was standing at. She watched it catch. She let it go on burning. Then she turned the loaf. Then she made the supper. Then she fed the boys when they came in from the pen, and Brom when he came in from the road, and Kale last as she had done since the first night. The order had not changed. The kitchen had not changed. The work had not changed. The meaning under the work had moved. She did not sleep the night Aldrich rode out. She sat at the table, pen in hand, paper in front of her. She drew lines. The lines were not lines for a survey. They were lines for a war. She drew the keep. She drew the wall they had broken. She drew the new channel of water. She drew the road south where Blackmore's house sat behind its own black gate. She drew the woods above the keep. She drew the river ford the road crossed before it reached the south meadow. She drew the 4 sides of the keep itself. She marked the kitchen door, the hall door, the pen gate, the well house, the hay store that had replaced the burned barn. She marked them with the small, careful crosses her father had used to mark exits on the map of the old, holding the spring. He started to be afraid. Then she made the second drawing. The second drawing was the one she had not let herself make for 3 years. Where a man would come in if he did not want to be seen. Wind from the north most nights, which meant the kerosene smell would not carry to the warrior's window until the work was nearly done. A patch of low brush on the east side that screened a man at a crouch from the watchtower for 10 paces of fence. The drainage cut on the south side of the long pen, which a careful man could lie down in and not be visible from the yard. She marked the 3 places. Then she made the third drawing, where she would put a watch. She made a list of names: Peer, Edrin, Brom. 2 men from the village Brom trusted who had not yet been told there was anything to trust. She did not put Cal's name on the list. Cal's place was in the keep. Cal's place was at the door, because the rule of a hunt was simple. The wolf at the den is not the wolf at the hunt. You keep the wolf at the den fed and rested. You send the others. She finished the third drawing as the sky began to gray. She put the 3 drawings in the front of her dress, against her ribs, where the notice from Drywater Hollow had ridden 8 weeks earlier on the cart ride that had brought her here. Then she went and started the bread. Cal came in for the first cup. He saw her face. He did not ask. He sat. He drank. He waited. "You are not riding today, my lord?" "No, you are not leaving the inner yard." "No, Brom rides the southern road. Twice, mid-morning, sundown, Brom rides the road. And we set a watch." She slid the 3 drawings across the boards. He looked at the first. He looked at the second. He looked at the third for a long time. "You have done this before. I drew the first one when I was 21. For my father." He laughed at it and put it on the shelf. By the time he stopped laughing, the holding was sold. "You will not put it on a shelf this time." "No." He turned the third drawing in the lamp. "You have not put my name on the watch." "No." "Why?" "Because if he comes to a Thornwood watch and you are at the watch becomes duel. And he wins a duel even if he loses, because the bench at Harnwich does not like a lord who kills a lord. He will come for the property. We will catch him for the property. The bench will write its name on the rope. Not yours." He looked at her across the table. "You are telling your alpha to stay behind a door. I am telling my alpha that the door is the throat of the keep, and the throat is where I want him standing." He almost smiled. "Not a real one. The honest one. Brom will love being told he rides the road. Brom will be told by you, not by me." He laid the drawings flat. He folded them along the lines she had already creased them in. He put them back into the front of her dress with the side of his thumb pressed, the briefest moment, against the boards of the table inches from her hand. He took the thumb away. He stood. "Veil? Yes, after this. There are things you and I will say at this table. Not before. After this, after this." He went out. Brom did not love being told he rode the road. Brom set his jaw and said one short word into his cup that the boys pretended not to hear. Then he went and saddled. Pyre and Edrin took the second drawing the way boys take a thing that has finally made them men. Edrin pinned the corner of the paper to the inside of his vest. Pierre put his hand on the hilt of the knife he had been carrying for 2 seasons without quite knowing why, and the knife seemed at last to know. The 2 village men came at sundown. Brom met them at the road, brought them in by the back step, did not bring them as far as the kitchen. They did not need to know whose drawings the watch was running on. They needed only the post, the hour, the signal. Brom gave each man a small clay whistle. The whistle was old, older than the wall they had pulled. It made a sound at a frequency a man's ear could find and a wolf's ear could not lose. They took their posts at full dark. She kept the hearth low. Not dark, low. A house with no light is a house that knows it is being watched. A house with one window glowing soft above the bread is a house in its ordinary night. Cale sat at the inside of the hall door, not in front of it, to one side, where the swing would not knock him. He had a blade across his knees. He had not put on the mail. Mail rang. He had on the dark wool. He held still in the way only a wolf in skin holds still, as if breath were a small inconvenience to be managed politely. She moved between the hearth and the door and the back step and the well house in a slow circuit. She did not stop moving. A still woman in a window is a target. A moving woman is a shadow. She had learned that from a story her mother had told once about a great aunt in a winter raid. The third hour after full dark she smelled it, not strong. A thread, carried on the slow breath the night sent down off the ridge. Kerosene, lamp oil at a guess. The kind a man bought by the gallon and never explained. She did not run. Running tells a watcher that a watcher knows. She walked, hearth to backstep to the side of the well house. She put her face into the dark over the well and breathed once, long, to be sure. It was real. It was coming from the east fence. The drainage cut at the south side of the pen, exactly where she had put the second cross on the second drawing. She walked the inside line of the wall to the hall. She did not knock. She opened the door the width of a hand. She said one word into the gap. East. KL was at the back step inside the half-breath. She did not follow. Her place was the door. He had not assigned it. The drawing had assigned it. She closed the door behind him. She put her back to it. She listened. Pierre's whistle went up from the east post inside 10 heartbeats. A second whistle answered from Edrin at the south corner. Then a third whistle. Different. Not the clay, a man's whistle. Low, 2 long, 1 short. That was Brahm on the road, which meant Brahm had a horse in his sight that had no business being on the road in the third hour after full dark. She counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then she heard the running boots, not from the east, from the south, 2 sets. Both inside the wall. She moved off the door because the door was no longer the throat. She crossed the kitchen. She took the long knife she had set on the table when she came in. She did not pick it up by the handle. She picked it up by the back of the blade in a cloth so the lamp would not catch it. The back step opened. Edrin came through. Sleeve torn at the shoulder. Blood at the hairline above his left eye. He was grinning. Pierre has one of them. Down, alive, and the other. Alpha is on him in the south wood. He will not get to the ford, and the oil, spread but not lit. I have it in dirt now, good lad. Sit. Press the cloth. She had no time to be sentimental about him. She moved past him to the back step. She put 1 foot on the stone and looked east. She could not see the pen from there, but she could see the lamp Pierre had set on the post. Swinging once, twice, 3 times in the agreed motion. A man down, held, not dead. She came back in. She sat across from Edrin at the table. She put the cloth on the wound for him because he was 19, and his hand had begun to shake the way a boy's hand shakes when the body has not yet caught up to what the mind has already done. Hold this. Press. Do not let go. Look at the bread. Mistress. Look at the bread, Edrin. He looked at the bread. She heard the second long whistle from Brahm out on the road. The all clear at the ford. Which meant the second man had not crossed water. Which meant KL had him. She waited. KL came in by the back step in the 7th hour. He came in alone. He had a slow walk. The walk of a man who had not yet decided whether to be calm or to break a chair. There was blood on his sleeve that was not his. There was no blood on his face. It is Blackmore. She set the cup down. The first one? No, the second. The one I followed to the ford. It is Blackmore in a coat he stole off one of his own grooms. He is on his knees at the ford. Brahm has him. I came back to ask you a question. Ask. He looked at her across the room. Edrin was at the table behind her, eyes wide, the cloth at his temple. Pierre was at the back step now with the lamp in his hand, breath still in his throat. He came himself, yes. He did not send a third man. He came himself, with 1 groom and 1 fool, to pour oil on my east fence. With his own hands, yes. Tell me why. She thought about it. Because he is out of moons. Aldrich has been in the village 10 days. The bailiff did not come back. Rafford is not answering his door. Blackmore woke at first dark and understood that nobody was going to do this for him anymore. So he came himself. To finish what he could finish. By hand. So when the bench came in the morning, there would be a burned keep and a dead lord, and a story he could write any way he liked. And he is at the ford. On his knees. In a stolen coat. With my Alpha's boot print somewhere on his ribs by the look of your sleeve. A muscle moved in Kale's jaw. He is asking for terms. He always was. He is asking for my word that he goes to a bench. Not into the river. She looked at him. She thought, very fast, about her father's chair by the window. About her mother's stone. About the line of 7 names Aldrich had read at this table. About the way her own hands had been shaking when she carried the lamp to the back step. She thought about how easy it would be to nod the once. She thought about how easy it would have been. 3 winters ago, For a man with a clean coat to walk into a small chapel in Harwich and not walk out. She thought about how nothing would have come back. Not the holding, not her father, not the 80 acres, not the milking goats, not the years. No, KL. He looked at her. Take him to the bench. Vale, take him to the bench. Killing him at the ford is a debt you carry until the day you die. Taking him to the bench is a chain you fasten to 4 other lords. Bring him in alive. He killed your father. He had my father killed. He paid for it. He has paid for 6 others. If you kill him at the ford, he does not pay for 6 others. He pays for the one. You take from him the only thing he still owns that has any value, which is the moment when the man who paid for my father has to look at a bench and say the name of the men who paid him. She did not look away. Bring him in alive. For me, he held very still for 1 beat. For you, yes. For me, he turned. He went back out the back step. He took Pierre with him this time. He left Edrin at her table with the cloth on his head. She sat down on the bench because her knees had decided finally to be honest about the night. The sky was beginning to pale when Brom rode in with Blackmore across the saddle in front of him, hands tied at the wrists, a bruise rising on the line of the jaw, a coat that had been a groom's coat and was now a rag. He did not look up as Brom dismounted him into the dirt of the yard. He looked at his own boots. He did not look at her at all, which she would think about later and not be sorry about. Aldrich arrived inside the hour. Aldrich had been in the village inn. Aldrich had been awake for 2 nights. Aldrich came up the road on a fresh horse and a fresh man at the saddle behind him, carrying the small black box that held the warrants. He did not need to be told what he was looking at when he came into the yard. He had been looking for it for 2 winters. He read the warrant out at the back step, not from memory, from the page, slow. Each name, Lord Voreth Blackmore of the Southern March. Master Talvin Rain of Ironford, who had supplied the apothecary's preparation. Bailiff Howell Stain of the Harwich Circuit, who had been bought 11 moons ago and had been writing false reports ever since. 2 other lords whose names Elinara had never heard and who were being read out at their own gates that morning by other inquisitors in other yards across the western counties. The Iron Crown Conclave. Named for the first time on a king's warrant, by a name that until that morning had been used only in letters they thought safe. When Aldrich had finished, he folded the warrant. Put it back in the box. He looked at Blackmore on the dirt. Then he did the thing he had not done in any other yard he had ridden into in the past 4 moons. He looked at Blackmore and he spoke to him directly, in his own quiet voice, "My lord, the post at Drywater Hollow, the cook who left this kitchen 3 weeks before the new mistress arrived, the notice on the chapel that asked for a woman of capable hands and no letters required. Those were yours. You wrote them yourself. We have the originals. You wanted a woman the Alpha could be persuaded to dismiss. You expected a woman who would not be in the kitchen long enough to be a problem. Did you not?" Blackmore did not lift his head. Aldrich did not need him to. Aldrich turned and looked at Kale. "Alpha, will you tell me how you came to have this man on his knees in your yard?" "He came to set my fence on fire. He brought his own oil. He was caught by my mistress's watch." "Your mistress's watch?" "Yes." Aldrich's eyes moved to her. They rested. They were tired and they were kind in the way of men, whose work has very little kindness in it, and who hold what little they have for the right moments. "Mistress Vale, sir, will you swear to the watch?" "I drew it." "I will swear to it." "Will you ride to the bench at Harwich with me when I bring the writ in?" She thought about the chapel at Harwich. She thought about her father in the hole behind the chapel. She thought about her mother in the hole next to him. "Yes, sir, I will ride." Blackmore lifted his head then, for the first time. He had a face that did not look noble in the morning light. He had a small fold of skin under the jaw that had always made his face look prosperous in the candle, and looked at sunrise only soft. He looked at her. He spoke for the first time since the ford. "You are the one." "The kitchen woman." She did not answer. "I named you in 2 letters, you know. I thought you were a complication." "I was not a complication. What were you?" She looked at him across the yard. She thought of the long line of women her mother had once put on a piece of paper. Widows of 7 holdings. Aldrich had named them all at her table the night the inquisitors stayed for tea. She did not say their names out loud now. She let them sit in her mouth like a coin she had been saving. I was the bill, my lord. You ran an account for 3 winters. I was the bill. He looked away. Aldrich had him brought up onto the cart. Aldrich did not allow him to ride a horse. A man who has been arrested for the conclave does not ride a horse to the bench. He rides the cart. Aldrich had been very particular about this with the office of the king. They had agreed. Peer was given the honor of walking the cart out of the yard. Peer did not laugh. Peer held himself like a man, which he was by then and would not be unmade from again. Aldrich stayed 2 hours after the cart left. He sat in the kitchen with her. He drank a 3rd cup of tea. He told her slowly and without making a speech of it that the bench at Harnwich would not be the only bench, that the bench in the city would also sit, that her name would be in the writ as the holder of the watch that brought him in, that there would be a small purse from the office of the king at the close of the matter, which she might take or might refuse. I will refuse the purse. Sir, as you choose, mistress. I would ask one thing, ask my father's papers. From the bench at Harnwich? There was a box of letter my mother sent in the year before she died. I would like the box. He nodded slowly. You will have the box. And one thing more. Yes, the neighbor. The one in the fine house. You said you have his name on the warrant. I do. Master Halvor Crane. She had not heard the name spoken in 3 winters. The sound of it did not hurt the way she had been afraid it might. The name had taken up so much room in her head that the actual syllables, said by another man at her table, were smaller than she expected. She nodded the once. Thank you, sir. He left. The keep was quiet again. The water still moved east through the broken line of the wall. The sheep at the far pen drank without any human telling them where the trough was. Edrin slept with a fresh cloth at his head on the bench by the hearth. Peer came back from the gate in the late afternoon and went to sit with him without being told. Brom stood at the back step. He looked at her a long time. He did not come in. Mistress Vale? Yes, you will not be staying in this kitchen. After the bench is done, no. Good. He turned and walked toward the well house, which was his way of saying a thing he did not have other words for. She let him have his back. She had no other words for it, either. Cale was the last to come in. He had washed his sleeve in the trough. The shirt was wet to the elbow. The wet shirt against the warm air made him look, for the first time since she had stood with him at the noon cart, like a man and not a lord. He sat across from her. He did not speak for a long while. Vale, yes, you stopped me at the ford. Yes, you were right. Yes, it would have ended the matter for me, and it would have broken the chain for the others. Yes. He looked at her hands. They were folded on the table now. Calm? How did you keep your voice level? I did not keep my voice level. I kept my voice useful. There is a difference, he almost laughed. It was a small sound, a breath through the nose, the closest she had ever heard from him. What do you want? From the bench, from the world, from the morning that comes after the bench, from the moon that comes after that. What do you want? She did not answer for a beat. I want my father's box of letters. Aldrich gave you that. I want my father's box of letters. You said that. Because that is the first thing. There will be other things. They will be quieter. He looked at her steady. Tell me one of the quieter things. She drew breath. I want to stand in front of a piece of ground in the morning and know it is mine, not by deed, by care. I want to see a flock count up. I want to see a well come back. I want to be the woman the boys come to in the kitchen. Because the kitchen is where the work gets done. I want a winter without the small voice in my chest that has been telling me for 3 winters that I should have been able to save the old place. And I want to stop carrying it. Carrying what? The thing my chest has been carrying since I was 23. It is heavy. I would like to put it down. He was quiet a long beat. Put it here, on this table, Cale. Put it down. She looked at him. She set both her hands flat on the table, the way she had set them flat the morning. Aldrich had said her father's name. She left them there. She did not say more. It was, between them, the closest thing to a vow either of them had ever made out loud. Then she stood. She turned the loaf. She fed Edrin. She fed Peer when he came in from the gate. She sent Brom in for the bowl he would refuse and would eat anyway. She fed Cale last, as she had done since the first night. The order had not changed. The kitchen had not changed. But the meaning under the work had moved. 6 weeks later, the bench at Harwich sat. 6 weeks after that, the bench in the city sat. 8 men were named, 6 were taken, 3 were hanged at the rope in the public square of Harwich on a cold blue morning in the 2nd week of Crow Moon. And Master Halvor Crane of the holding east of Harwich was the 2nd of the 3. He had a clean coat at the rope. He had asked for one. He had been given one. He had asked, at the very end, for the bench to consider his service to his county. The bench had not considered it. She did not stand at the front of the crowd. She stood at the back. She wore the brown shawl. She had a small parcel in her hand that was a fold of bread for the road and the box of her mother's letters which Aldrich had sent ahead to the inn the night before. The rope dropped. She did not look. She heard it. She turned. She walked to the cart. Cale was at the cart. He had not come to the square with her. He had waited at the cart. He had known not to be inside her line of sight when the rope dropped. She got up onto the cart. She sat next to him. She did not cry. She put her hand on his sleeve, the once. He looked at her. He did not say anything. He took up the reins. He drove. The Dawthorne contract was signed the same moon. The flock count was at 300 head by midwinter. By the first warm of spring, it was at 327, and a small house had been raised on the rise to the east of the keep, with a kitchen of its own, and a window that looked back across the broken wall at the ridge to the north. It was not a large house. It was a good house. It had a good hearth. The mantel was a single oak beam. Brom had set with his own 2 arms because Brom would not let either boy near it. She walked the framing of it with him in the 2nd week of Stag Moon. She did not ask why he had built it. She did not ask who it was for. She did not need to. She walked the kitchen. She walked the small back room. She walked the window. She stood at the window and looked north. From the window she could see the line of the broken wall. From the window she could see the spot of darker ground where she had knelt and put her hand to the dirt the first day. From the window she could see the line the water still ran in. She turned to him. She did not say yes to a question he had not asked out loud. She said the one thing that was, between 2 people who had only ever spoken plainly, the answer to every question that mattered. This belongs in this kitchen now. She set the small fold of paper she had carried in her sleeve since the morning at Harwich onto the mantel. The fold contained, folded into itself, the warrant that had named her father as the first holding taken by the conclave. She had read it 9 times in the long weeks between the 2 benches. She had read it until the words did not pierce. She did not put it in the fire. Not yet. She set it on the mantel. Some things belong in a hearth. Not yet. Soon, he stepped closer. He did not touch her. He lifted one hand. He brushed the loose hair at her temple back behind her ear. It was the smallest motion. It was a motion only a man who had decided a great deal in private would make in a doorway. Veil, yes. Stay, yes. She did not need more than that. He did not offer more. There would be time. There would be ground. There would be a winter and a spring, and a flock count on the other side of both of them. The wolf came up to the threshold, not as a man, as the other shape. The high gray shoulder of him, the slow, patient line of the head. He did not come past the door. He lay down across the door, not at her feet, across the door, between her and the road south, between her and any man who might come up that road and not have business at it. He did not lie there in submission. He lay there in the old work of his kind. The work that says the throat of the house is mine to watch tonight. The work that says nothing in this doorway crosses without my notice. The work his line had done at thresholds long before this keep had a name. She put her hand once, lightly, on the rough fur between the great ears. She did not stay there. The gesture was small. The gesture was a small private thing. She turned back to the window. The water moved east in the low light. The sheep beyond the broken wall were a slow drift of small pale shapes against the green. The ridge stood where it had always stood. The ground under it had begun, all summer, to come back to itself. She thought about her father. She thought about her mother. She thought about the chapel at Harwich and the rope, and the man at the rope and the kitchen at Drywater, and the notice nailed to the post outside it. She thought about the woman who had read the notice and not yet known what she was reading. That woman had come to a yard of 12 men who would not move and had moved instead. That woman had knelt at a piece of ground Other men had walked past for 2 centuries and had heard the ground speak. That woman had named the bill on an account that had been running through her family for 3 winters and had refused to be settled by the easy hand at the ford. That woman was, now, standing at the window of a house her lord had built without asking. With a wolf across the threshold, with a fold of warrant paper on the mantel, with a name on a royal bench writ that read, in the clerk's careful hand, Mistress Eleanora Vale of Thornwood, holder of the watch that took the conclave. She had carried a coal in her chest since she was 23. She had carried it through a small holding, through a chapel, through a road, through a kitchen with a cold hearth, through a wall pulled at noon, through a poisoned trough, through a bench at Harnwich. She had carried it because letting it go felt like letting the cold in. She was not afraid of the cold anymore. She did not put the coal down. She set it, at last, into the new hearth. She watched it catch. She let it go on burning. The sheep moved beyond the wall. The wolf breathed at the door. The man who had built the doorway stood at her shoulder without touching her. The land that had been dying was no longer dying. The land that had been taken from her father was, in a way the bench at Harnwich would not have understood, and did not need to, being given back. Not in deed, in care. The way her father had said once, in a kitchen she could not go back to. She did not turn from the window for a long time. When she did turn, the light through the new glass had moved a hand's breadth across the boards. The boards were new. The boards smelled, still, of resin. The boards would be hers to scrub and to wear out and to know. She put her hand on the sill. She breathed in. She breathed out. She went to start the bread.